Magnolia Shorty was the first woman who ever signed to Cash Money Records. She's a legend in the South, and today we're breaking down how she ended up dying in one of the most brutal gang wars in history. Magnolia Shorty got her name from the Magnolia Projects that she came up in. The Magnolia Projects were in a part of New Orleans called Central City, which is where the most deadliest gangs in New Orleans came from. Central City has been one of the most dangerous hoods since the 70s. Gangs started fighting to sell heroin back in the day. Then the situation got even worse when they switched to pushing crack cocaine. There are a lot of sets in the area, but the ones who ended up killing Magnolia Shorty were the 39ers. The projects were always wild, but there was a lot of music coming from the hood too. Juvenile and Turk came up in Magnolia and were in a rap crew with Lil Wayne back in the day called the Hot Boys. Birdman from Cash Money Records had ties to the Magnolia Projects, and that's how he found Magnolia Shorty. Birdman signed her to Cash Money, and Magnolia Shorty started hopping in the booth with the rest of the label. Birdman also discovered Turk after he saw him rapping at a block party with Magnolia Shorty. So she was a big part of how the Hot Boys first formed and played a big role in the history of New Orleans rap. Rappers in New Orleans started a wave back in the 80s called Bounce, and Magnolia Shorty was taking the sound to a new level. She dropped her first record in '97, and people started calling Magnolia Shorty the Queen of Bounce. Her first record, Monkey on the Dick, was entirely produced by Cash Money's in-house producer, Manny Fresh. It was a big hit in New Orleans and helped put Cash Money on the map before they were known to the world. It looked like Magnolia Shorty was going to take over the game back then, but she never dropped another album. She was still putting in work in the studio, but Magnolia Shorty stayed too close to the streets and was brutally murdered before she could finish her second record. But before we get into why Magnolia Shorty was shot 26 times, we gotta dive into the shock and murder wave that was tearing up New Orleans. The Magnolia Projects were in Central City, and one of the most violent crews in that area was called 3NG. 3NG is based on 3rd and Galvez, and has been running Central City since the early 2000s. Back then, they were beefing heavy with a crew called the Calliope Porch Boys, but by 2003, the New Orleans cops reported that the Calliope Porch Boys had been wiped out. Going to war with the Calliope Porch Boys made 3NG one of the most respected gangs in New Orleans, but it also brought in a lot of heat from the cops, and even the FBI and CIA started paying attention to what was going down in Central City. The original Magnolia Project started getting torn down in the early 2000s, and Hurricane Katrina flooded the whole area. New project buildings went up and were called the CJP community instead of Magnolia, but the new projects were even more violent. A crew from Magnolia called Bird Gang started beefing with 3NG, and in 2009, they got into a deadly shootout in the middle of the Mardi Gras parade. According to the cops, 3NG and Bird Gang ran into each other on St. Charles Avenue while the Mardi Gras parade was going by. There were hundreds of people all around, but that didn't stop the crews from upping their straps. Shots started going off and everyone ran for cover. Both sides were busting at each other, but the only people who got hit were innocent bystanders. The shootout made headlines everywhere and put a lot of pressure on the cops to stop 3NG, but nobody knew how violent they were about to get. While 3NG was taking over Central City, a crew called G-Strip was running the heroin business in the upper 9th Ward of New Orleans. G-Strip had a violent rep too, and in 2010, they linked up with 3NG to make a new gang called the 39ers. The 39ers ended up becoming one of the most brutal gangs in the world. They went to war with gangs all over Central City in the 9th Ward, and in 2 years, they allegedly caught over 20 bodies. Gangs click up all the time, but when 3NG and G-Strip made the 39ers, even the cops had no idea how crazy the streets were about to get. The 39ers were spread out between Central City and the 9th Ward of New Orleans. They had trap houses all over the place, and they would stash weapons in random places like bushes and fields so they could run and grab them if they needed to. What made the 39ers so respected in New Orleans is how ruthless the shooters were. They didn't just drive by and spray at the ops. The 39ers walked them down and made sure they didn't get back up. They were known for using big rifles and shooting people over 20 times just to make sure the job was done. The 39ers had a lot of shooters, but Gregory Rabbit Stewart was on a different level. He confessed to over 10 murders, but rumors say he actually caught over 20 bodies before the cops got to him. Rabbit helped turn New Orleans into the murder capital of America in 2010 and 2011, but he had been surrounded by violence since he was a kid. Rabbit saw his first murder when he was just 4 years old, and a few years later, when Rabbit was in the 6th grade, he watched his homie get killed right in front of him. Rabbit got active in the streets early and started selling crack when he was 11 years old, but joining the 39ers is what turned him into one of the most brutal killers in New Orleans. Merle O'Fray was one of the OGs in the 39ers, and when Rabbit was 14, Merle O'Fray and Daryl Franklin recruited him into the gang and had Rabbit pushing heroin for the crew. At the same time, another 39er affiliate named Louis Daniels started teaching Rabbit how to kill. That same year, Rabbit used what Louis Daniels taught him and caught his first body. The cops pulled up to a house on Urquhart Street and found 3 people inside who had been shot. All of them were alive, But a few hours later, the cops were called back to the same house and they found a dude named Calvin Brumfield dead in the backyard next door. Then 2 years after they killed Calvin Brumfield, Rabbit and the 39ers went on a killing spree that shocked the entire city. In October 2009, a dude named Percy Baker was shot near the Florida housing projects while he was walking with his son. Percy Baker survived, but ended up getting paralyzed, and Rabbit and his homies Rail, Woo D, and Pound slid on the guys who allegedly shot Baxter. A few months later, Rabbit and his crew shot and killed Kendall Favor while he was sitting in his car. Favor was allegedly affiliated with the crew that beefed with the 39ers called Press Park Gang. When Rabbit eventually flipped and told the cops about the murders, he said that he went to Percy Baker's crib after they killed Kendall Favor. Rabbit and Kendall Favor both ended up in the Florida projects. Rabbit told him, "Son, you know, we handled that. It wasn't the dude who shot you, but it's one of his friends. They're gonna cry behind that." Taking out Kendall Favor was only the beginning though. In April 2010, Merle Frey, a 39er OG named Daryl Franklin, and a bunch of other 39er affiliates were chilling by a wing shack on Desire Street up in the 9th Ward when Daryl Franklin spotted a dude named Slugger. Daryl Franklin and Slugger used to run drugs together after Hurricane Katrina. Daryl's whip got flooded during the hurricane, and they used the insurance money to drive to Texas and pick up half a brick of cocaine. They fell out though after Slugger went to prison and linked up with another crew, and Daryl Franklin was already planning on taking them out. It seems like Slugger had the same idea though, because a few minutes later, 3 shooters pulled up on the 39ers. Quelton Broussard, Elton Fields, and Corey Lewis rolled up on Desire Street in broad daylight and started letting off shots. Daryl Franklin and the 39ers started running for cover. Daryl ducked under a house, and that's when he looked up and saw his homie, Terrence Butler, aka Cheddar Black, who caught a bullet in the head and was left with half his face gone. The ops also killed Derek Jones, aka Gucci Man. After the ops pulled off, Daryl Franklin, Merle Frey, and Rabbit all hopped in Merle Frey's Audi and chased him down. They caught up to him on Clauette Street, and that's when Rabbit and Daryl Franklin dumped over 40 shots and killed Quelton Broussard. At the same time, Slugger and his crew got into a shootout with some more 39ers on Almonaster Avenue and killed a 39er named Jesse Terry, known by the streets as G-Strip Baby. Rabbit said that the 39ers all wore white to G-Strip Baby's funeral because he was an innocent person. Rabbit said that G-Strip Baby sold drugs, but he was a good dude who didn't hurt anybody. Cheddar Black's funeral was different though. Rabbit said the 39ers were all black because Cheddar was like a gangster. He killed, he's just like all us. That was the lifestyle he lived, and he wasn't tripping. The 39ers lost 3 people in one day, but they were about to take the violence to a whole new level. On May 11th, 2010, Rabbit and his homie Pound caught a dude named Rayshawn Jones and killed him. Jones was allegedly affiliated with a crew called the Ride or Die Gang that was beefing with the 39ers. Then just over a week later, Rabbit and his crew caught another body. The 39ers had beef with a lot of people around the Calliope projects. Calliope was where Master P from No Limit came up, and Master P's brother C Murder was affiliated with a crew called the Cut Boys. The Cut Boys had a lot of clout back in the day, but most of them ended up dead or in jail. In 2009, one of the last guys standing from the crew was a dude named Omid. On March 15, 2009, Omid was driving down Magnolia Street when 2 shooters in different whips ambushed him. A 39er named Kentrell Hickerson was allegedly behind the hit, and that's what made Omid's cousin Jamal Smith start sliding on the 39ers. Jamal Smith allegedly clapped back and killed a 39er named AP, and that's when Rabbit and his crew started hunting Jamal. 8 days after Rabbit killed Rayshawn Jones, he spotted Jamal Smith outside of the courthouse. Rabbit and his crew didn't have their guns on them, so Rabbit told his homie Nelly to hop out and make sure Jamal didn't leave. Rabbit and some other 39ers got their guns and came back to the courthouse and waited down the street until Jamal Smith came outside. Jamal's homie Lester Green came through and picked Jamal up when he was finished inside the courthouse, and they drove right past Rabbit and arrested the 39ers. There were cops all over the place, but that didn't stop the 39ers from catching their ops. They pulled up to Lester Green's whip, and that's when T-Red and Rat hopped out and tried to light him up. Rat and T-Red forgot to switch the safeties off their guns though, and that's what saved an innocent woman's life. Lester and Jamal had a girl in the car with them, but she took off running and was able to get away before Rat and T-Red got their guns working. Jamal and Lester weren't as fast though, and both of them got shot by the 39ers. Lester was shot in the head and died, but Jamal got lucky and survived. Then just 8 days after that, Rabbit and his homie T-Red caught another op named Donald Daniels and shot him to death. 2010 was already one of the deadliest years in New Orleans, but the 39ers weren't done yet. Elton Fields was involved with the shooting that killed Cheddar Black and Derek Jones in April 2010. He ran off on foot and escaped after Rabbit and Daryl Franklin killed his homie Quelton Broussard, but it didn't take long for the 39ers to catch up to Elton Fields too. On October 11, 2010, Rabbit, T-Red, and another 39er were driving around when they spotted Eldon Fields and started following him. When they caught up to Eldon, he had parked his whip and was talking to a girl on the street. Rabbit and T-Red hopped out and ran up on the car, and Rabbit told the girl to get out of there. Eldon Fields had his door open and tried to close it, but Rabbit stood in front of the door and started shooting him in the face, while T-Red was shooting him from behind the back window. Eldon Fields was on the hit when Cheddar Black got killed, and that's why Merle Frey wanted him gone. Rabbit said Merle loved Cheddar and he wanted everybody dead who had something to do with it. While the 39ers were tearing up the city, Magnolia Shorty was doing shows and working on her second album. She never gangbanged, but Magnolia Shorty was tight with a lot of street dudes, and that's what ended up getting her killed. One of Magnolia Shorty's homies was a dude from Calliope named Man Man. Man Man had major beef with the 39ers. Back in the day, Man Man and Magnolia Shorty were both tight with a rapper from the Magnolia Projects named Soulja Slim. Soulja Slim had a lot of respect in the streets, but he was going hard in the rap game too and had a deal with No Limit Records. Soulja Slim dropped his debut album, Give It To Him Raw, on No Limit in '98, which made it to number 13 on the Billboard charts and is now considered a classic in New Orleans hip-hop. He also had a #1 hit with Juvenile, but Soulja Slim never really left the trenches. According to rumors, Soulja Slim set up and robs another rapper in New Orleans who had ties to a major heroin dealer. Some people claim that Soulja Slim actually killed the other rapper, and that's why he allegedly had a 10K bounty on his head. Soulja Slim was brutally killed outside of his mom's house after he allegedly murdered the other rapper, and a dude named Jarrell Smith was booked for killing Soulja Slim. The cops caught Jarrell with a stolen police pistol with a scratched off serial number. Bullets from the gun also matched the ones that killed Soulja Slim, but Jarrell Smith beat the case because nobody would testify against him. Jarrell ended up getting arrested for 3 other murders after that, but beat all 3 cases. New Orleans has something called the 60-day law, which means that the state has 60 days to charge you with a felony or they have to let you go. So Jarrell kept beating the cases due to lack of evidence and witness testimony, but he ended up getting shot to death in 2011. Before that, Man Man clapped back and allegedly took out another dude who people think was involved with the hit on Soulja Slim. In 2005, Man Man allegedly killed a dude named Stephen Kennedy in Texas. Then after he came home to New Orleans, Man Man put a huge target on his own back when he started telling people he wanted to kill Merle Frey. The 39ers heard about it, and that's when Rabbit and his crew got active. On December 20th, 2010, Rabbit got a call from his homie Rat. Rat said he knew where Man Man was at, so Rabbit, T-Red, Rat, and a 39er named Freaky slid into the Calliope Projects with a dude named T-Bone behind the wheel. Man Man wasn't in Calliope, so Rabbit told T-Bone to drive to the Georgetown apartments where Magnolia Shorty lived. Rabbit knew that Man Man was tight with her, and that's how the 39ers caught both of them. Magnolia Shorty was supposed to be heading to Miami to perform at a bounce festival, but she forgot something in her apartment and had to go back to grab it. When Rabbit's crew rolled up to the Georgetown apartments, they spotted Magnolia Shorty's whip pulling in and decided to wait outside of the gates. Rabbit and the rest of the 39ers were waiting by a speed bump where Magnolia Shorty would have to slow down, and when she left her apartment with Man Man, the 39ers were ready. All 4 shooters started letting off shots. Magnolia Shorty got hit and crashed her whip, and that's when the 39ers surrounded the car and kept shooting until they were sure that Man Man and Magnolia Shorty were both dead. Magnolia Shorty didn't have anything to do with the beat, but she still ended up tragically dying from it. And when Rabbit testified about it in court, he said, "She was caught at the wrong place at the wrong time." It took a while before the cops booked anyone for the murder, but they finally got a break in the case after they booked Rabbit and he started telling them everything. In 2011, Rabbit was arrested on federal heroin trafficking charges. The cops had been trying to take down the 39ers for years, and Rabbit helped put a lot of his old homies in prison. He wasn't the only one who flipped though. Daryl Franklin, Freaky, T-Bone, and a dude named Big Wash all started working with the cops and told them about 27 murders the 39ers were involved with. Rabbit knew he was facing the death penalty, so he told the cops everything and got hit with 4 life sentences instead. He was the first one that flipped, and Rabbit's testimony helped the cops take down 10 of his old homies. T-Red, Woody, Pound, Rat, and 3 other 39ers all got hit with life sentences after Rabbit snitched on them. While Rabbit was on the stand, he didn't show any guilt for all the people he killed, but he said that he felt bad about flipping on his homies. Right after he told the court about all the murders, Rabbit said, "With T-Red, bruh, that's really like my true brother. I know our relationship is over with, because you know what I'm doing to him right now." Daryl Franklin also got hit with a life sentence, but the ops caught up to Merle Frey before the cops could. Merle Frey was one of the biggest drug kingpins in New Orleans history, but he got killed in 2013 and his whole crew started falling apart. Most of the OGs ended up dead or serving life sentences. They were the most brutal gang in the city, but 5 of their biggest shooters flipped and took everyone down with them. The 39ers are still active in New Orleans, but luckily the violence has slowed down and nobody is tearing up the city like Rabbit and the shooters were back in the day.